Who really controlled the land of Canaan? The thunderous storms of Baal, or the quiet, persistent influence of Asherah? For thousands of years, communities here believed that their survival depended on these two deities, each commanding different aspects of life. Crops, weather, childbirth, and family prosperity were not left to chance. They were thought to be directly guided by these divine forces. Baal, known as the storm god, dominated the sky. His favor or anger was seen as the cause of droughts, floods, and fertile seasons. Archaeological evidence confirms the importance of his worship. Altars, temples, and ritual offerings have been found throughout Canaan, ranging from simple village shrines to large urban sanctuaries. Grain, oil, and even animal sacrifices were offered to him, reflecting the belief that controlling the weather was essential for survival. His power was immediate, visible, and often terrifying. Asherah, often called the Queen of Heaven, represented a different but equally essential form of influence. She was associated with fertility, life, and continuity. Household shrines, small figurines, and inscriptions indicate that her worship was integrated into both public and private spaces. Families sought her protection over children, livestock, and crops. While Baal ruled the dramatic forces of nature, Asherah was thought to govern the subtle rhythms of life, ensuring growth, safety, and prosperity over time. The two deities were often worshipped together, creating a system that addressed both immediate and long-term needs. Texts and artifacts suggest they were sometimes depicted as a divine pair. Baal's storms brought rain and potential destruction. Asherah's nurturing guaranteed that life could continue on the ground. Rituals frequently included both, showing that neither could be fully effective alone. This partnership made their worship compelling, resilient, and deeply embedded in society. Israelite texts repeatedly highlight the tension between these deities and Yahweh worship. Passages in Judges, Kings, and Chronicles condemn the devotion to Baal and Asherah, noting that many Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord by serving these gods. Kings like Hezekiah and Josiah sought to reform these practices, removing Asherah poles and destroying altars. The reforms indicate not only a religious struggle, but also a social and political one, as these deities were deeply integrated into daily life, family traditions, and community identity. The practical appeal of Baal and Asherah explains why reform efforts often faced resistance. Baal's storms were observable. They could make or break a harvest. Asherah's influence, while less visible, was just as essential. The fertility of the land, the growth of families, and the well-being of households were attributed to her care. People worshiped them not merely out of obedience or fear, but as a strategy to protect their lives, their food supply, and future. Archaeological findings support this perspective. Inscriptions from Israelite sites sometimes invoke Asherah alongside Yahweh, suggesting that even when attempting to maintain monotheism, communities found it practical to recognize her influence. Figurines, small shrines, and household artifacts demonstrate how personal and widespread her worship was, reflecting a society in which divine favor was intertwined with everyday survival. The coexistence of Baal and Asherah highlights the complexity of Canaanite religion. One deity governed dramatic, immediate forces. The other sustained the quiet, essential rhythms of life. Their combined influence was both pervasive and practical, addressing the uncertainties of weather, fertility, and social stability. This dual system of divine control made it difficult for Israelite reformers to eliminate their worship completely. Understanding Baal and Asherah provides insight not only into ancient religious practices, but also into the human need for security and guidance. The people of Canaan did not see their reliance on these deities as superstition. They saw it as necessary. Life, survival, and prosperity were believed to be inseparable from the gods' favor. Even today, the question remains intriguing. How could two deities, one visible and dramatic, the other subtle and persistent, hold such influence over society? Their combined sway shaped every aspect of Canaanite life, from agriculture and family structures to politics and social norms. And it raises a fundamental curiosity. If people relied so heavily on these forces, who truly controlled the land? Baal, Asherah, or both? If you're finding the story of Baal and Asherah as fascinating as it seems, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover. How these deities shaped everyday life, how they worked together, and why their influence was almost impossible to escape. Comment below if you think Baal or Asherah held more control over Canaan. And keep watching to see how their partnership affected the people and the reforms of the Israelite kings. While Baal controlled storms and the skies above, Asherah's influence extended quietly into the very fabric of life in Canaan. Archaeological discoveries, including household figurines, inscriptions, and small shrines, show that families regularly invoked her for fertility, protection, and crop growth. She was seen as the guarantor of life itself, present in homes, fields, and communities. Where Baal's power was dramatic and immediate, Asherah's was subtle and ongoing, making her a constant presence in the people's daily lives. Evidence suggests that Baal and Asherah were often worshipped together as a complementary pair. Rituals frequently included both deities, with Baal invoked for rain and storms, and Asherah for fertility and continuity. This partnership was practical. Controlling the forces of nature alone was not enough to ensure survival. Life had to be sustained, families had to grow, and crops had to thrive over months and years. By appealing to both deities, Canaanites addressed both the immediate and long-term challenges of existence. The persistence of their worship demonstrates just how deeply embedded these beliefs were. Biblical texts repeatedly warn against serving Baal and Asherah. Kings like Hezekiah and Josiah launched reforms aimed at removing Asherah poles and destroying Baal altars. These reforms reveal both the strength of Canaanite traditions and the difficulty the Israelites faced in changing deeply held practices. Removing a symbol or shrine could not erase belief. It required reshaping the cultural and social systems that had grown around these deities. If you're finding the story of Baal and Asherah as fascinating as it seems, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. There's more to uncover. How these deities shaped daily life, worked together, and why their influence was so difficult to resist. Comment below if you think Baal or Asherah held more control over Canaan. And keep watching to see how their partnership impacted the people and the Israelite reforms. Asherah's influence was particularly resilient because it was tied to practical concerns. Fertility, household prosperity, and the continuity of life were matters that demanded attention and care. Figurines of Asherah found in Israelite homes indicate that even as reformers sought to eliminate her worship, families continued to honor her privately. In some cases, inscriptions invoke Asherah alongside Yahweh, suggesting an attempt to reconcile monotheistic reform with practical devotion to a deity who ensured survival and growth. Baal's storms were visible, terrifying, and immediate. A season of drought could devastate a village, while timely rainfall could ensure abundant harvests. Asherah's power, however, operated quietly, influencing the growth of crops, the health of families, and the outcomes of childbirth. Together, they created a dual system of dependence. One deity addressed immediate, visible challenges, while the other provided ongoing, essential support. This balance made their worship both compelling and enduring. Rituals reflect this partnership. Offerings, sacrifices, and festivals often involve both Baal and Asherah, blending public and private devotion. Leaders who oversaw these ceremonies gained legitimacy, while communities reinforced social norms and collective identity. Worshipping only one deity was seen as incomplete. The combined devotion to both provided a framework for managing uncertainty in daily life, whether in agriculture, family matters, or communal survival. The persistence of this worship also highlights the challenge faced by Israelite reformers. Even after the destruction of altars and shrines, people continued to seek Asherah's blessings privately. Her influence was subtle but essential, intertwined with the natural and social cycles of life. This created tension between the ideals promoted by reformers and the practical needs of ordinary people. Attempts to suppress Asherah's worship often failed not because of her power alone, but because of how deeply her presence had been woven into everyday life. By studying Asherah and her partnership with Baal, historians gain insight into the complexity of Canaanite religion and society. Their combined influence was not merely spiritual. It was practical, cultural, and social. Communities relied on Baal for immediate forces beyond human control and on Asherah for the quiet, ongoing support that allowed life to flourish. Understanding this relationship explains why their worship persisted for centuries, despite repeated attempts at reform. Ultimately, the story of Baal and Asherah illustrates the human desire to manage both immediate threats and long-term survival. Their dual influence shaped Canaanite society, creating a system of devotion that was both visible in storms and invisible in the daily rhythms of life. The tension between these deities and the Israelite reforms highlights how religion, culture, and practical survival were inseparable, and why the question of who controlled Canaan remains so complex. Despite repeated attempts at religious reform, Baal and Asherah remained central to life in Canaan. Kings like Hezekiah and Josiah sought to remove their influence by destroying shrines, tearing down Asherah poles, and eliminating altars. Yet archaeological evidence and biblical accounts suggest that these reforms were only partially effective. People continued private worship, household rituals, and local festivals honoring these deities. The persistence of their influence shows that Baal and Asherah were not just gods to fear or admire. They were practical necessities for survival. Baal's power was immediate and visible. A sudden storm could flood fields or bring life-giving rain. Communities looked to him for protection, agricultural success, and victory over natural threats. Asherah, by contrast, was subtle but equally essential. She governed fertility, family continuity, and the slow, steady processes of life that ensured survival across generations. Together, they created a system of divine oversight that addressed both urgent crises and long-term stability. The Israelite prophets and reformers framed devotion to these deities as moral and spiritual failure. Texts in Kings and Chronicles repeatedly condemn idolatry, warning that the favor of Yahweh was required for national prosperity. Yet the very persistence of Baal and Asherah worship illustrates why their influence was hard to erase. Their appeal was not abstract. It was practical. People relied on Baal for immediate, visible results, and on Asherah for the quiet, ongoing care that supported life and family. Their worship addressed real concerns, blending fear, hope, and survival. Even when altars were destroyed and Asherah poles removed, many families maintained her presence in private spaces. Figurines, inscriptions, and household shrines indicate that her influence persisted alongside attempts to promote monotheistic reform. In some cases, inscriptions invoke her alongside Yahweh, suggesting that people sought to integrate her perceived benefits rather than abandon them entirely. This demonstrates how deeply these deities were woven into everyday life, from agriculture and family to politics and social rituals. The dual nature of their influence, one visible, one subtle, helps explain why Baal and Asherah were so difficult to suppress. Communities depended on immediate forces such as rain and storms, and on long-term support such as fertility and household prosperity. Reformers could legislate against shrines and rituals, but they could not easily eliminate the practical needs these deities fulfilled. This created a tension between religious ideals and social reality, a tension that lasted for centuries. Understanding the roles of Baal and Asherah provides a window into the human experience of ancient Canaan. Their influence was not only spiritual, but deeply practical. People turned to them because survival depended on both visible forces and subtle processes, and because both deities offered solutions to real, pressing problems. Their worship shaped everything from agriculture and family life to political legitimacy and social cohesion. The legacy of Baal and Asherah is a reminder of how religion and daily life were intertwined in the ancient world. One deity brought storms and immediate results. The other ensured growth, continuity, and protection across generations. Together, they controlled not just the land of Canaan, but the rhythms of life itself. Reformers and prophets may have challenged their worship. Still, the dual influence of Baal and Asherah demonstrates how deeply human communities rely on forces, seen and unseen, that promise survival, stability, and prosperity. For anyone exploring history, archaeology, or religious studies, the story of Baal and Asherah offers lessons that extend far beyond Canaan. It highlights the practical nature of worship, the interplay of visible and invisible influence, and the resilience of cultural beliefs even in the face of reform. Their enduring presence reminds us that human societies have always sought control over both immediate crises and long-term survival.
If you found this journey into the lives and influence of Baal and Asherah intriguing, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into ancient history, archaeology, and the hidden forces that shaped the world. Comment below, who do you think had more influence over Canaan, Baal, and Asherah? Hit that like button and join the discussion, because the story of these deities and the societies that worship them is far from over.